Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is the Sigma 16mm f1.4 DCDN, a wide and bright prime lens designed for mirrorless cameras with cropped APS-C sensors. Originally launched in 2017 and released in Micro Four Thirds, Sony E, Leica L, Canon EF-M, Nikon Z and Fujifilm X mounts, as of early 2025, it's now also available for Canon's RF system, and you can see it here mounted on an EOS R10 body. It costs around $490 or £390. Along with the 23mm f1.4 re-released alongside it, this means Sigma's full set of 4 f1.4 APS-C primes, as well as their 2 f2.8 zooms, are now available in the Canon RF mount. Now, since I've already reviewed this lens several times on other systems, I'd normally direct you to those videos for reference. But as third-party lenses for Canon RF are still a rarity, I thought I'd make a new video specifically for those neglected EOS R owners who are going to be understandably quite excited by the prospect of a new, bright prime lens. So along with a load of new photos, tests and comparisons made with an EOS R body, I can also talk about specifics to this particular system along with alternative options. Because while Canon doesn't yet offer any traditional prime lenses designed for their cropped EOS R bodies, they do have a full-frame prime lens that you may be interested in instead. So on the left is the Canon RF 16mm f2.8 STM, measuring a compact 69 by 40mm and weighing just 165 grams. While on the right is the Sigma 16 1.4 DCDN, a tad wider at 72mm but over twice the length at 90mm and substantially heavier at 415 grams. Now obviously the major difference here is the Sigma having an aperture that is 2 stops brighter, delivering shallower depth of field effects and faster shutter speeds or lower ISO sensitivities under the same conditions. But the Canon may still be an option for you, considering it's much more compact, not to mention compatible with full-frame bodies should you upgrade in the future, and cheaper too at around $300 or £320. So I'm going to show you how their features and quality compares. First, a quick look at the design and controls. The Sigma 16 1.4 is a long and fairly plain looking lens, designed before the I series added aperture rings. So the only control is a generously wide manual focusing ring which turns nice and smoothly, and from the Canon menus you can also reconfigure this to operate as a custom control ring, albeit lacking clicky feedback as you turn it. At the end of the barrel is a 67mm filter thread, and unlike Canon's non-L lenses, it's supplied with a bayonet hood, thanks Sigma, while also sporting sealing at the mount with a rubber grommet. Next, here's the Canon RF 16 2.8, again looking much more compact. It's another simple design with just one control ring, much stiffer than the Sigma and a little bit scratchier too when you're turning it. On the plus side though, a switch lets you configure this ring for either manual focus or a custom function like adjusting the ISO sensitivity or exposure compensation. It is handy, although since it does have to perform double duty, it turns smoothly, unlike the dedicated RF control rings which are clicked for more tactile feedback. At the end is a smaller 43mm filter thread, although no hood is supplied as standard. Instead you'll need to buy the optional EW65C accessory, and looking at the mount, there's no weather sealing. Focusing speed in single AF mode is similar, although the Sigma does have an edge here as well as being quieter. As seen on other Sigma lenses though, the active area when using continuous servo AF is a little smaller than Canon's own lenses. Now Canon supports servo AF across pretty much the entire frame, while restricting Sigma to operate in a slightly smaller cropped area. Okay, now for coverage with Canon's cropped cameras reducing the field of view by 1.6 times, turning 16mm to an equivalent of 25.6. Here's the view from the Sigma lens followed by the Canon 16, and like all modern lenses, both employ profiles to correct for distortion, and that's applied automatically on JPEGs. If you're shooting RAW, remember to apply the profile or you're going to suffer from distortion. It's not meant to be used without it. So these are the views after the profile has been applied, with both sharing almost exactly the same coverage. It's always worth confirming this though. Let's stay at the pier for a comparison of their quality with a distant real-life subject, and as always I've angled the camera so that details run into the corners. Let's start with the Sigma 16 1.4, wide open to 1.4, and take a closer look in the middle. Here the sharp details from the get-go, and little to no benefit to closing down in terms of center detail. At f2.8 we can make a direct comparison against the Canon RF-16 pictured here on the right, where again the detail is similar, but remember the Sigma was achieving a similar result with a 2-stop aperture advantage. So let's now return to the Sigma sample at 1.4 and head into the corner where there's a little softening of ultimate detail, but I wouldn't say it's bad here. As I close the aperture, there's gradual improvements to detail, and by f2.8 it's looking better. And at this point we can compare it directly to the Canon, also at 2.8 on the right, which is not only looking worse than the Sigma at 2.8, but actually a tad worse than the Sigma looked at 1.4. Closing the apertures brings very mild improvements to the Canon's corner sharpness, but it remains behind the Sigma and unable to match its contrast and sharpness. This may surprise you since the Canon lens is actually designed for a larger full-frame sensor. Next for portraits and presentations, where I've switched to video to also test the continuous autofocus tracking. First up, the Sigma 16 1.4 at 1.4, where you can see a decent degree of blurring behind me, especially at close range. The coverage is a bit tight for handheld vlogging, but it's fine for environmental portraits or presenting to camera, and the continuous AF works fine here on the R10 body. Also notice how the coverage remains fairly consistent as I move closer and further away, indicating minimal focus breathing. Next for the Canon 16 at 2.8, its maximum aperture, where the potential for blurring is much reduced. Also notice how the coverage changes as I move back and forth, with the view narrowing for closer subjects. This indicates worse focus breathing than the Sigma 16 and could prove distracting for video. That said, for full-frame bodies where you'd exploit that ultra-wide coverage, the Canon 16 is still a great choice for handheld vloggers. To illustrate the difference in depth of field and focus breathing, here's a comparison with both lenses side by side. I'd say the Sigma is preferable here. And finally, for a closer look at bokeh and rendering, here's my very light test, starting with the Sigma 16 at 1.4, where you can see decent sized bokeh blobs. Like most larger aperture lenses, these do elongate towards the corners, but they're otherwise mostly well behaved. Now let's close the aperture to f2, and then to 2.8, at which point I can compare it to the Canon RF-16 also at 2.8. You'll notice the Sigma at very close range is reproducing the ornament larger than the Canon, and this is from the exact same camera distance. Do notice though that the coverage in the background of the fireplace and the arrangement of the lights is similar. In this particular example, the optical design of the Sigma lens is delivering bigger bokeh blobs on a subject that's from the same distance and using the same aperture, but I'm now going to switch the Sigma on the left for the 1.4 version to compare them at their respective maximum apertures. Quite a substantial difference, I'm sure you'll agree, and this potential for a much shallower depth of field is of course the main reason to choose the Sigma lens over the Canon. Now for my verdict, during which I'll show you some photos of the Sigma 16 mounted on an EOS R10 body, and for fun, these were all taken at the maximum aperture of f1.4. Sigma's 16mm 1.4 DCDN is a very welcome addition to the limited range of lenses designed for Canon's EOS R mirrorless cameras with cropped APS-C sensors. Indeed, at the time I made this review, Canon had no conventional RF-S primes and only a handful of zooms with, well, let's say uninspiring apertures. So to have a prime lens and a bright one at that is exciting news for owners of the R7 to the R100. Now it may be based on a design that originally came out in 2017, but still performs well optically almost a decade later. It's pretty sharp into the corners, even wide open, and delivers decent shallow depth of field effects, while the equivalent focal length of 26mm is ideal not just for presentations and environmental portraits, but also as a general purpose wide angle. There's also little competition in the native RF mount with autofocus either. Canon's RF-16 2.8 has the benefits of being more compact and roughly 2/3 the price, but the Sigma is 4 times brighter and delivered better quality in my tests. My only real complaint is that it's physically quite long. And while I expect Canon will offer a brighter full-frame ultra-wide in the future, it's not going to be cheap, and it doesn't even exist right now, so it's just pure speculation. So, in the absence of almost any competition, it's easy to recommend the Sigma 16 1.4 DCDN to owners of cropped Canon EOS R cameras who desire a wide prime with a bright aperture. Plus remember, the 16 is one of 4 1.4 primes now available from Sigma, so also consider the 23, 30 or 56 models if those lengths suit you better, and I've got reviews of all of them. Which brings me to the end of this particular review. If you found it useful, please do consider giving it a like and my channel a follow, just a couple of clicks, much appreciated, and do let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.